Hello, everyone, and welcome to Beyond the Scenes, the show where we explore the life of creatives beyond the scenes and beyond what they do in the industry. And today I have my friend Joshua Ausley, cinematographer, filmmaker, but we're going to talk about many other things.
Let's talk about
We've
life.
been friends for a while, and I consider you my best friend.
Oh, thank you. Likewise.
Likewise.
Actually.
That's great. What I think of is sometimes you meet people at a job that you're just going to work with them during that particular project.
Of course.
And then you rarely see it. Maybe at any cine gear, you say hi.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like with you, there was like a great connection, you know.
Mm-hmm.
We reunited here in Atlanta at an event. We went to have some Japanese food and we talked. And every time that we were talking, we were finding things out about each other that were almost like interrelated, almost like having a very similar life throughout our youth. And so I want to go back to where you're from and what is it at that early age of your childhood that you remember pursuing a creative career?
Okay. Wow. That goes pretty far back because even when I would say, 10, 12 years old, I picked up books and I was an avid reader. So I love stories, not just visually, but I loved books and like reading and like how that would take you in your mind to another world and seeing, experiencing life through another character's viewpoint and things like that. So that was the impetus maybe for me to, learn about storytelling and characterizations and things like that. It made me want to learn how to write. And that's something that I started doing from maybe like in my early teens, 14, 15, 16 years old. I started writing, a lot. And that was, I think, initially, what made me, and I was into movies too. I would actually write stories almost like from a cinematic point of view, where it would be like, it wasn't really the screenplay format, but I would write it as though a camera was seeing the action rather than being in the head of the character, right? Which is what you're supposed to do. And so, I learned along the way better ways to describe and to narrate the story. But at first I was thinking, hey, what if we see it from this perspective or this angle? And then I was thinking from that way.
That's cool. So you will say that writing was your path to explore your creativity. And it wasn't even writing prose. It was more like this visuals, this action type of things. And I remember when you told me that from an early age you were moderating a Star Wars club or something,
Yes.
like in writing stories that were part of this parallel universe of Star Wars.
Yeah. So when the internet was pretty new, we're talking
Dial up.
93, 4, 95, and the internet was just web pages, right? There was no video. You were lucky to have any kind of images and things like that. We're talking bulletin boards, IRC chat, things like that. So, we got together with like-minded people that were into, I'm sure there were clubs about many various things, but Star Wars was a big thing, back then, because you had some of the games, the most popular games at the time were out with like Jedi Knight, X-Wing, TIE Fighter. So we had people, we were modding those games and, creating new missions. And I would write the stories, and as you join the club, you could play the missions. If you created artwork, or something, you could get, the more you participated, essentially, you could be promoted.
Your ranking higher.
Rank would go higher, yes. So, and you could go all the way up to from a, a major to a captain, Commodore. You'd become a Commodore of a flagship or a starship, and you could rise to Admiral. You'd have to create all these positions so that people would, participate.
That's cool because for me, it was a similar path as well. I start writing for a magazine, and then the main newspaper in my home country in Colombia bought that magazine, and I got almost introduced to working on the newspaper through the magazine. And it was through writing that I started exploring my creativity. And then I transitioned to visuals. How was your transitioning to maybe photography or visuals or video?
That's a good question. So the transition to visuals took a while. It took quite a while because I always thought I would just be. I wanted to be a screenwriter, and a novelist. When I lived in Japan, which is a whole nother story we can get to, I actually had the opportunity to work as talent. And so that was my first exposure really to the film industry. In Japan, it was pretty easy to get a job being talent. I had opportunity to be an extra. I was in magazine shoots. I was in commercials. And I even did voiceover. So there were different opportunities there, and you could do all sorts of things. And so that was my exposure to film. And it was film back in those days.
Wow.
So there was no thought of like the technicality of the cameras or anything. It was all about film sets, and life and like what I was supposed to do and what I was supposed to wear and things like that, So that was a really interesting thing. I loved it and I wanted to do more. It's just that when I got to the end of my visa, my stint in Japan, I had to decide whether I was going to try to renew my visa or come back to the States. I met my wife in Japan, and so we came back to the States. She immigrated, and then I actually tried to do talent work here when we got here as well.
That's great. Now, before we go into your life in Japan, which is pretty interesting by itself, is there any other creatives in your family in the arts or media or anything like that?
Well, actually, not really. My father was an entrepreneur. He worked, his parents were entrepreneurs. His parents were florists. He decided not to be a florist. He decided to sell classic auto parts, muscle car parts from the Chevelles from the 1960s and 70s. That was his business. I grew up going to car shows, to drag races, car races and things like that. And so I kind of took the same, I guess, spirit of entrepreneurial spirit and wanted to do my own thing, as well.
Interesting. And not to say, but I follow your mom on Instagram, who's pretty famous with her Instagram account.
Yes.
But so there is a part where everybody has like their unique pursuit.
That's true.
And they're good at it.
Yeah, that's true. In the last 10 years, my mom has explored a whole new avenue of her, visual medium, going on Instagram, taking photos of her farm, her chickens, and she's into interior design, so, for home and different things. So, she's really into that, and it's been wildly successful.
Yes.
We're all shocked, I think, that she's sponsored by Tractor Supply or, all these shout outs she's getting from other big influencers.
That's pretty cool because I know that my dad wanted to be a journalist when he was growing up. But he didn't have the means to go to school and pursue that career. And I went to journalism school. That was my initiation into media. I went to photojournalism school. I graduated from school. And that's how I transitioned to the visual medium. And from photography, it was just a matter of time transitioning to documentary, just like you transition from your acting or performing to then taking the camera and exploring that. Do you remember what was, your first project where you could say like, that's like my first visual project that I feel proud of when you were working again on media or doing something with media?
Well, when I was in Japan, we would shoot video skits and things for our church. So I took a role in that. I don't know if I was like directing it, but I was definitely involved. It was a collaborative effort.
Yeah.
But I think that's where I really thought, hey, I want to be a director. That kind of a thought process, right? So we would go out and we would shoot little shorts and skits, which I would act in, but I would, also want to be behind the camera and things like that. So they were, they were terrible, but that's what they were, very early digital cameras and things like that. We're talking way before YouTube and before
With mini DVs.
Yeah, mini DVs or even some sort of like really early digital, videos. That's what we shot on.
I ask you because if I go back and think of like the first projects that I did, I just feel that is what I was passionate about. It didn't make me any money, they were like silly projects, but I feel like it was so engaging, almost like what you do in film school when you have to do your projects, and just that passion. It is throughout the years that it becomes a job, but I always go back and think about those projects, and I always kind of like reconnect with that passion of telling a story. And it's cool that your journey to becoming a cinematographer and a filmmaker comes from writing, because not everybody it's well versed in writing and pursuing the story. There's more people that are focused into the visuals, but writing is so necessary to tell a story. Many films are great in visuals but really weak on the story. I remember recently we went to see Dune 2, and you were telling me all about the story. And it seems like fantasy is a genre that you gravitate, right? And when did you find that, fantasy was your thing, that you like to write with?
Long ago, as a kid, Chronicles of Narnia, Lord of the Rings, I read all of those when I was 10, 11, 12 years old, So those were big influences on my life because it lets you jump into another world, something completely different from our world, right? And even just introducing different conditions into your world and the implications of what that could cause or what that could do for how you can act, what you could do, what you can achieve. I think that's what fantasy is about, right? It's about just introducing something completely different that may not be necessarily scientific or realistic, but what would the implications of that be on people, on the characters, on their lives, and in the world?
Is that what if? It's like thinking, in a world, just that little phrase, in a world, with a lot of trailers start with, but it transports your creativity in your mind to what are the possibilities?
Absolutely.
What if?
Yeah.
And I know that you also double into music as well. You play the bass. What other instruments do you play?
Well, I'm primarily bass player. I started out with guitar. I learned classical and electric guitar. I started playing bass because there was a need for another bass player in our church in Japan, and so I picked that up. And I was also a singer, and doing all that. When we came to the States, what happened was I continued to play, and this was before I got into video, into the film industry. I wanted to be, a rock star, right?
Of course.
So we formed a band. Actually, I was in a couple of different bands and did the gigging life and things like that, trying to make it, and it was still early, right? Early in the internet, it was hard to get your work out there. MySpace was the only social media site. So, there's really not a good way to get out your music.
And a lot of bands at that time had their MySpace page.
Yeah.
That was the way to promote.
Yes, I wish I could have saved some of our old videos somehow because they were on the MySpace page and it doesn't exist anymore. Yeah.
So what was the closest to becoming a rock star?
I don't think there was a really close. We were able to open for a couple of really famous Christian bands at a water park, which was really awesome.
That's cool.
And we did that, and then we re-recorded, a few songs and had a little, LP, that we would send out to people, a little demo. But that was about it. In fact, the second band that I was in, I had to step back due to work. Starting as a freelance, DP video shooter, and also with the birth of my daughter, she was very young. So it kind of stopped me from being able to just go practice 3 times a week or whatever. So once I actually stepped back from that band, I offered to shoot them a music video, and they were my first music video, really.
Yeah. That's so cool. So you mentioned Japan a couple of times, and I know that that was a very key period of your life. How did Japan come about, and what was that experience that really transformed your life in a very positive way?
Well, I got interested in Japanese culture through a couple of different ways. First of all, martial arts from the time I was 15 or so. Oh, actually, even when I was earlier in life, I always loved martial arts movies, right? So I always wanted to be some sort of ninja or something. But when I was around 15 years old, we discovered a dojo close to my house, taught a really great style called Ishin Ryu. And it's an Okinawan style. It's taught primarily to Americans or non-Japanese. The founder, Tatsuo Shimabuku, combined a number of other Japanese styles and created this hybrid style, right? It was very practical, and it was taught at this dojo, and the dojo also taught judo. So I was able to go in there from about 15 and just dove right in. I felt so at home. I really connected well with the sensei as well as, the other students. And at the time I was being homeschooled, so we were able to go every day at lunchtime to get our class in, right? So then I started going at night. I started going to the judo classes, and, it was just natural. In fact, the first thing that I thought I would be in life was a martial arts instructor, So that was like 2 or 3 careers
Wow.
ago,
It's like a Forrest Gump type of life.
Yeah, it could have been completely different, going to tournaments, I wanted to be the world champion karate, fighter, and I love it. I wish I had really continued up until now.
Yeah.
But it was just a wonderful time. I even in Japan, I continued doing judo. There's no Ishinryu is not a style that's taught in mainland Japan, but judo is, because judo is a Olympic sport. So there are rules. It's sportized, and so you can go anywhere in the world and learn the same judo, right? Whereas there's hundreds of styles of karate. So judo was amazing. I was able to study at the Kodokan, the official, hit places of judo in Japan, and even represent them in tournaments, which was amazing. A couple other things that connected me to Japanese culture, anime, so I was super into anime in the 90s. That was when everybody was watching, the classic anime from Dragon Ball to Akira and, Ghost in the Shell. Yeah, movies like that, right? So into that, I was really intrigued by the Japanese eye and the way they told the story, how they would just tell stories in an unorthodox way to the Western view, and the visuals.
And it wasn't always like a happy ending.
Oh.
It was like very crude sometimes, and that was very interesting.
Yes, the way they told the stories and the way the stories would develop and end could be completely different. So I think that unpredictability made anime really, new and unique for me. And the visuals too, like super tight close-ups and lingering on certain shots that would symbolize something else.
Yeah.
Those were things that I really love, And I think because of those interests with the martial arts and anime, I decided to take Japanese in school, So in college, I took Japanese. I spent a couple of years learning, and then some time really intensely on my own before I did the study abroad, and went there. Once I made it to Japan, I felt like I was in the place, like
you belong.
I belong. It's like, where have I been all my life? I've been missing this, and it just felt like being on another planet that looked like Earth, but it was just different and had slightly different rules, and it was just so much fun. Everything was kind of new, and unique in a way, and kept give me energy, that in a way I hadn't had before.
What would you say it is about the Japanese culture that, makes it not only very unique, but also the values that they have, right? I understand that they value the families in a different way that maybe Westerners do, or traditions and elders and order, and some of those things that people experience when they go to Japan, and they say, man, this is totally different to what I experienced at home.
Sure. I mean, traditionally, Japanese culture is very family oriented. There's a lot of respect. toward your elders, even how you speak to someone older than you is using teinego, which is the, formal language, and then the way that you speak with someone, younger than you is just, casual,
Yeah.
right. So there are even those linguistic differences that kind of keep you separated, right? And show you where your place is. And so there's a lot of disrespect for where you are in life, where you are, at your stage of life, in your position, maybe your job or in your school. And then,
It's almost like every position is honored, even if you're just sweeping the streets or being the caregiver, or caretaker, or the teacher or the lawyer. It's like you have a place in society that is just as important as the doctor. Is that a true statement of like traditional what it is in Japan?
Yes, for the most part, yes. Everyone has a position, and they give 100% to what it is that they do. Whether you're a waitress or waiter or whatever you're doing in your job, that is something you really dedicate yourself to. And there's a high emphasis on professionality, and just respect for common man. And I mean, it's got a reputation as being one of the safest places, and it's true. I forgot my wallet places, and people would come out of restaurants saying, "This is your wallet, sir," or I could leave it on the train even. And I could be pretty much certain to get my wallet back with all the money in it, which is amazing,
Yeah.
If I left my camera, on the train, someone would wake me up, if I got off, and I would almost miss my stop. One thing you can do is like fall asleep on the train. You get up and people are like, "Oh, wait, you forgot your camera or your wallet or whatever it is, your bag." I leave my bag and my bike, not even concerned that it would be stolen, when I go into a store and come out. So those things are really nice.
Interesting, because my understanding also, and I know my understanding of Japan is very limited, but I know that Japan has to import a lot of natural resources, or at least that their resources are very limited for the amount of people living there, and how their society structure is. Like they have to import a lot of like natural resources and basic stuff.
Definitely oil, gasoline, things like that. Yeah.
Even water, I heard, like
Yeah.
And their wealth and their prosperity doesn't necessarily come from abundance of natural resources, but there is a culture that makes them, excel in business and in trade, and the richness of while other cultures that are well, provided with natural resources are not necessarily at that level. Do you find that to be true in the Japanese culture in general?
Yeah.
That is not the lack of resources that determines prosperity, but it's almost like a mentality.
Right. Yes. I mean, I think that there's a good work ethic. There's also the whole expectation that you are trying to, even at school, think about what your career is going to be, what kind of job you want to get into. And so there's this pursuit of excellence, whether it's even from elementary to middle to high school. Am I going to get into the right high school? Am I going to get into the right college? And that puts me in a position to get into the right job, right? And so then it's working your way up. Now, this is all traditional, of course. It's changed somewhat in the last decades, where people are changing jobs and things. But classically, you would go into a job and you'd be there probably for life. There was a lot less chance that you would be job hopping, around and things like that.
And you also mentioned that you met your wife in Japan.
I did, yeah.
How was that about?
Well, it was amazing because, I thought I was going to marry a Japanese person. Okay. I was just looking for the right person at the time. I was in my early 20s, dating. And I saw this really beautiful girl in church, and I thought, oh, she's nice. I'd like to talk to her. She didn't look Japanese to me, but I didn't know if she spoke English or not. So our first conversations were in Japanese,
okay.
And
how was her Japanese?
Good. Yeah, very good. Not perfect, very, very conversational. But I quickly learned that, not only was she fluent in English, she was fluent in Mandarin, Cantonese, Malay, and Japanese. So, yeah. So I ended up marrying a Chinese Malaysian.
Chinese
That's
Malaysia.
great. Yeah.
And you've been to Malaysia
Many
yourself?
times, yes. Spent a lot of time in Malaysia, yes. We had to do a little bit of a long-term relationship while she went back and graduated.
Okay.
But I would go visit Malaysia, and then I would go over there. After I finished in Japan, I went over there. We spent about a month there before we came back to the States. And we've been there several times, since then as well.
Two different cultures. I mean, my wife is from Venezuela, but there was a time in the history of Colombia that Venezuela, Colombia, Ecuador, Panama, they were all the Great Colombia, a single country.
Okay.
And then they split. So they're very similar customs and traditions in our culture, and Spanish is the language that we spoke in both countries. But I can't imagine marrying somebody from a totally different culture.
Yeah.
Is it been enriching? Is it been challenging?
There are always challenges to overcome. I will say I consider, and this is just my personal opinion, that, a Malaysian culture is a little closer to the Western than Japanese. They're a very multilingual, multicultural country. Malaysia is a melting pot, kind of like the U.S. You have a lot of the native Malay, you have Indian, you have Chinese, and other cultures in there, So you have a common language of English, you have a lot of the, similar cultural things, a lot of similar stores and things that, that you wouldn't necessarily have in Japan. So there's and I mean, I think everything kind of stems from that, right? They're watching shows, the popular shows from America in English, whereas in Japan, it would be subtitled or dubbed, So, I think the impetus of that is a lot of difference, stems from that, maybe. How about in Colombia and Venezuela? Do people see, if you meet someone in Venezuela, is that unusual, or is it
No,
is there any sense of...
One thing to know is that Venezuela today is very different from the Venezuela that was in the 80s, for example. The Venezuela in the 80s was a very prosperous country, all the resources that they had. I grew up knowing Venezuela as the rich neighbor to our country.
Really?
That's how, we back in the 80s, Colombia had a lot of challenges with the drug lords and the violence, and Venezuela was not in that same predicament that Colombia was.
Yeah.
And so a lot of Colombians actually emigrated to Venezuela. And at first, it was hard for many people to do life in a different country, that even though it's a neighboring country, is very close. But Venezuelans, for the most part, embraced Colombians during the time of the 80s. Now, it almost feels like it switched, and a lot of Venezuelans are immigrating to Colombia.
Yeah.
I'm not very knowledgeable about how the reception has been.
Yeah.
But I know that Venezuelans around the world are, struggling. And for some people, marrying a Venezuelan is like, oh, why? Why would you marry a Venezuelan? It's like, what's the story behind it? And but I think we're very close. There's a huge debate in which who is the homeland of the arepa? Is it Colombia or is it Venezuela? So I don't want to go into those kinds of very hidden debates.
Yeah.
But I love both.
Okay.
I love Colombian and Venezuelan arepas.
What's the difference in the arepa?
Well, the Colombian arepa also depends on the region that you are. So if you're in the mountains of Colombia, you probably will have a very thin arepa. Very, very thin, very crunchy, and almost like no salt and no flavor. Like you will put that flavor and salt. It's almost like grits, that you put the butter and the salt in. But in the mountains of Venezuela, they call it the arepa gocha. And it's actually like a very chunky arepa that you usually cut in the middle. Then you put the butter inside. And sometimes you can put cheese or ham or things like that. They also have the arepa reina pepiada, which comes from a beauty queen.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's avocado and chicken, and then mayonnaise and like this mixture, and then you stuff the arepa with that mixture, and that's the arepa reina pepiada.
Sounds
But Colombia has arepa huevo, which is a chunky arepa with a full egg inside. So they cook the egg, they put it inside, they close the arepa, and they deep fry the arepa.
wow.
So when you bite at the arepa, there's a full egg inside the arepa. So you see, it's like crazy. You go this level, then Colombians are going to top it, and then Venezuelans come out with something else. But all around the world, both Colombians and Venezuelans, in the restaurants, they have some version of the arepa. There's one that I like a lot in Colombia. It's arepa de choclo. So it's sweet corn. It's
big, the corn, the sweet?
Yes, the sweet corn. And then you can put cheese on top of it, and it melts.
Nice.
Wow. Very, very good. And in Venezuela, they have something very similar. They call it cachapa.
Ah, yes.
So in today's episode, it's all about the arepa.
right. It sounds like how we do barbecue here, right? North Carolina's got a barbecue, and South Carolina, different than Alabama, the Memphis and Texas.
Yes.
Yeah, there's all kinds of like.
So I would say the arepa could be the barbecue of the United States.
Right.
But I feel like in those differences, they could also be unity of the cultures.
Right.
Like unity is that uniformity.
That's right.
And when we try to get other people to be just like us, it's like just to, we think that unity is that everybody has to think like me, and then we can be united. But people can look different than you, like in Japan, have different cultures, but there's an ingredient that is uniting us,
Right.
And I believe like all those Latin American countries have something in their culture in common that allows us to
there's a strength in diversity, right? I mean, I met some of my closest lifelong friends in Japan. They were Chinese, Korean. There was a Colombian. There were, England. In Japan.
Cool.
And in fact, our common language was Japanese, except for obviously the English. But with the Chinese, the Korean, the Colombian, they didn't really speak English very well. So our common language was Japanese. And not only the language, but just the fact that we were from the other culture, trying to adapt to living in this other culture, right? This other country. And that naturally would bring people together just to even just try to understand one another better, and to understand like, okay, how are you adapting? What are the techniques what do you experience here, and how do you adapt to that? And that really brought us together.
So we experience different cultures, different countries, and we were talking about diversity, and that it doesn't have to be uniformity. And then in the midst of diversity, there are elements that connect us, that unite us. And what do you think has been that key that unlocks relationships, regardless of what culture, what country you've been to?
Well, I think there's a huge value in diversity. How do you find a kernel of something that allows you as a base to connect with people, right? To build on, right? And for me, a lot of times that has been faith, and my journey of faith with God and as a follower of Jesus Christ. I think that was a really strong core of how we connected, as well as in Japan. Some of my closest friends were Chinese, Korean, Filipino, Malaysian, England, Australia, French, and we all had that as at least our foundation, right? And that was so powerful. I remember, Carlos, we went to in Thailand. We were there for fun. We went on a vacation, and we decided it was like, I can't remember if it was Saturday evening or if it was Sunday, but we found a church service. I don't even know how we found it. We thought, oh, this ought to be interesting. Let's just see what it's like over there, right? Went in there, we spoke not a word of Thai, right? But there was this sense of just camaraderie, a sense of belonging, a sense of just the spirit, and we were at peace there. We were able to pray, and affirm what they were doing and what they were saying, even if we didn't understand it. And we had never been so welcomed either.
Wow.
You know, we walk into a place and they have no idea what these foreigners are doing there. We don't understand a word of what they were saying. But, you know, it was just really amazing, the sense that we got there of having some sort of sense of camaraderie, a sense of brotherhood with that.
I think that is super important, especially in the world that we live today, that is very divisive,
Yes.
polarized, where, you know, politics are not said to unite us anymore for a cause of the good of the world. And it seems like where politics are failing, where economical systems are failing, is the true nature of connecting with faith, with other people, and relating at that level. You know, that goes beyond any other discussion that you can have. And I think that could be the basis of restoring communities to where it's not about the country you're coming from. It's not about your social, economical background. It's not about even the politics. There is an inherent nature that calls us together to participate as a world family.
That's right. Yeah, that's the most powerful glue, you know, that can combine us to level. The most fundamental thing, I think, that goes beyond culture, beyond politics or any other systems, you know, and it's a spirit connection.
And traveling not only sets you up to experience that, but it also humbles you.
That's right.
Because sometimes you're going to be exposed to things that you're not used to, and be helped by people that you were not expecting to be helped from. You know, it's like it's a humbling experience. Once you travel with the openness to let that happen. So I think being humble to be touched will set you up also to touch other people's lives.
That's very true. Yeah.
You know, Japan is not the only country that you have explored and that has enriched your experience in your life. We went together to India and Nepal.
India and Nepal.
What an adventure.
That was an adventure. Yeah.
Masala chai.
We were drinking chai like it's going out of style, right?
And there's some, I don't know if it's a conception about the United States or misconception about Americans, is like they don't like to travel around the world. They feel like they're okay in their own country. So there's that mentality but I've seen like traveling really expands and enriches your horizon in a way that sometimes you don't even expect it. How is traveling being a key part of your journey and your development?
I mean, I think it's been fundamental, you know, just traveling and being more of a citizen of the world just totally opens up your mind, you know, your mindset and your understanding of other cultures. It helps you understand people, to be patient with people, to try to see things from their viewpoint. I think it helps you become not only a better person, but a better friend, like, you know, someone who is able to relate. Because I think being able to relate to one another is a keystone to becoming friends, right? And to sharing experiences. So the more that you can do that, you know, I think it makes you a better person, you know, and a more well-rounded person. You know, I think the stereotype of Americans as not being well-traveled is, one, because we have a large country with a lot of areas that you can go, deserts and, you know, mountains and beaches and all that. But also, yeah, you know, there are, and especially nowadays, there's a more travel culture developing, right? Yep. And I think, you know, obviously the number one destination spot for Americans is Mexico because they're our neighbors, but also, you know, all over, right? It's just become more accessible to go to Europe, to go to Asia, to go different countries.
And part of the work that we did in India had to do with schools, you know, building schools and this humanitarian work, working with churches over there and what they're doing. And we can really identify with both of our lives and careers, very focused on that type of work as well. And that was very special to me when I met you. I felt like that connection was going to birth a good relationship. How is, you know, going to these countries, traveling, but not only working with your tools, your skill, but also working to the betterment of the communities as well, you know? Is it like a rewarding experience? How do you found that that's something that you wanted to pursue and do? Because it's not necessarily something that's going to make you money,
No,
but it gives you another type of opportunity to experience a different type of reward.
That's right. I think it's super rewarding to go to another culture and try to be a part of something to help out. I'm part of an organization, a nonprofit that builds schools in India and has a feeding program for, homeless kids in Nepal as we went together and experienced. And, we're not going there to try to save them or to, give them something, we're partnering with local organizations.
Empowering them.
And empowering them, yes, to do what they're doing, to achieve their goals, right? And so, as with the school that we were in Calcutta, they're great. They're helping so many kids. Their school graduates hundreds of kids from elementary all the way up, and has a really good track record of success, getting kids into university. They're learning English, which helps them, and especially in India, to get into better schools and better jobs, things like that.
Even the little that you give of yourself, I'm not just saying giving money, but of yourself becomes something that another culture can treasure as well.
Yeah, I remember you were teaching like a little short seminar on, production to the people, there. And it was really eye-opening for them. Not only did you do a great job, but it was just the fact that they were so open to it, and maybe they didn't see things from that angle, that they thought that, hey, this is something I could do too, so that's super. Well, you never know, right? What you have to offer someone just from sharing, you probably don't know anything about the caste system in India, or like whether they feel they're limited because they're in a different caste or something. You're just sharing authentically what your experience was, coming from this country, going to that country, and learning this and learning that. And for them, that could unlock something totally new in their mind.
And that was in Calcutta, but in Nepal, we went to this market where the kids go and they're, some are begging on the streets or working the streets. And we went under this bridge, and it was very dark, a lot of dust and dirty, and they were cooking for themselves.
Yeah, over open fire.
On the open fire.
Wow.
And the fact that we went under the bridge with them is like this people from another country coming here and sharing with us. That was a very unique experience.
It's one of those things where you think, wow, how many people on earth got to do something like this? Now, sometimes that might be something really, special, or what you think is cool, but this is actually pretty cool. This is unique. This is a unique experience, and it enables you to really connect with humanity on a different level, right? Because, we're very blessed to be here and have what we have. If not, that is the way, that you would live, right? You get what food you can. You start a fire with a wood fire and a pot, and you make your food,
And they were cooking for the whole entire group.
They shared. Yeah, everyone was so selfless. Nobody was pushing in line to get their food. They were in the mindset of this is our community. Yeah. This is what we're going to share, and this is for all of us. Yeah.
Yeah. Which, there are a couple of things that I wanted to ask you. One of them has to do with both in Japan, India, and some other countries that you've been to, even in Mexico. A lot of what people do are either handcrafts or traditional made things. And in the world of AI, where it seems like a lot of this technology is replacing some people's jobs, I think it's very valuable to appreciate what AI can't do yet.
That's true.
Like these things that are done by hand, that are beyond, the technical things that AI can do. What do you think is the future of handmade, of the future of things that are done traditionally? Do you think we're going to treasure it and appreciate it? Is it going to get a different type of value now? Or is this new technology going to necessarily replace a lot of things?
I think what it's going to do is it's going to give us a reprioritization, of in our mind about what is worth learning like the value of certain, crafts and trades, it's going to give us a much more appreciation for trades that you have to learn and do with your hands, whether that's farming, building things, construction, maintenance of things. And I think with the craft, that's going to be a big key thing, because, with automation, let's say you can in a factory make millions of some sort of handbags, whatever. But what's the difference between that and what's made by hand, in a traditional way, right?
Almost like the uniqueness and the imperfection that comes from doing one thing at a time by hand gives it a special value.
Yeah. And one thing I really believe, Carlos, is that, there are certain techniques and trades that if they were to be allowed to die out, AI, it might record the technical recipe of how to make this thing, but that's not going to give you the full story, right? Like, how can you reverse engineer, how to make some beautiful, clay making, like, ceramics or, production of mezcal or something.
The Japanese sword.
Or, sword making from reading something, you can follow that recipe. You're not going to get that result if you don't have any experience, right?
Yeah.
So it would take you many, many, many tries, many, many failures, many, many years, just like it did originally. And you might not ever find that same quality, that same value that what we had, because it was passed down from person to person in knowledge, right? So that's what I really believe that we don't want to lose are those valuable skills, because you're never going to exactly get them back exactly how they once were.
And it's interesting that some artisans, the way they do things is almost like the clay is talking to me. The clay wants to be made in a certain way, or where I'm painting this and almost like the painting is telling me where I should go. Like almost there's this sentient communication with what you're doing and how you feeling things are going. I don't think AI necessarily can emulate that connection with what it's being made.
Oh, right. It's more than just following a technical manual. There's a connection with the work, spiritual connection even, that, you feel and you respond to as you're going, right? I think that's why in Japan they have made such an art form of many different types of trades, whether that's even the production of making sushi, cooking, there is a big difference in eating sushi in Japan and eating it anywhere else in the world, and it can't be just down to the quality of the fish, it's the quality of the chef.
I think even in filmmaking, many people in our industry are really, really afraid, which, there's some value to that or some truth to that. But I feel like what you were sharing at the beginning of how you were reading books, transporting your mind, creating things out of all these different ideas, there's some element of AI being able to recollect all those things. But they're experiences that are enriching your life, your particular path, that are impacting the content that you do. And I don't know if AI, at least in its current form, it's able to replicate that in filmmaking.
Right. I really don't think so. I think it can have a facsimile of, repeating a storyline based off of algorithms and most commonly used storylines. But, part of the human experience is, making mistakes, fixing those mistakes, imperfections like we talked about, and also, just telling it from your own personal experience, your heart, like AI will not ever experience, heartbreak or, the kind of disappointment that you can as a human, and then build back from that and overcome that and have some sense of overcoming, those are things that come through on the page or in the story that I really just can't see AI, replicating. And not only that, I think that audiences will respond to that, I think intrinsically we don't want to to applaud and celebrate something that was just a copy. I mean, if that were true, then where's the value in studying and hard for a test in school? What's the point anymore? If I can just have my AI assistant do it for me, right? Is that the goal that we want to have, and the value we want to eschew in society is like, well, my AI assistant can do most of my work. I'm just a manager. Well, that's not the value that typically we'll have, in human societies. We value hard work and innovation and a good work ethic. And in school, same thing, right? So if I can just essentially cheat on my homework, then where's the value, right?
I just picture years from now, AI watching our video and laughing at us. Yeah. Finally, I wanted to ask you about mezcal. That's another thing that I've been learning to appreciate the tradition of the mezcaleros. And as a mezcal connoisseur that you are, how do you develop that passion for mezcal, even going to Oaxaca, understanding what is behind it in the story, and it just beyond just drinking a spirit, there's something special about it.
Yeah. Well, I'll preface that to say I consider myself still fairly inexperienced. I've only been into it for a few years, trying to study as quickly as I can and as respectfully as possible. I just found that it has some unique property to it, not only in flavor, but in the production of it. It is one of those things that we talked about that has to be passed down generationally, right? It is not something that is made on an industrial scale, at quality. It's not something that you can just take a recipe and just try to do it, These are very special techniques that are passed down usually 2, 3, 4, 5 generations. And so there's a unique quality to it. It's as a spirit, it's far more complex than people, I think, will initially assume. And there are just a wide variety, of flavors. So that, I think, it opens up a whole new respect for it. You're whereas most spirits you're trying to get uniformity and get quality. With mezcal, there's like an infinite variety. Uniformity is nowhere to be found here. That's the opposite of the goal. You're digging into unique flavors, unique aspects, and then understanding that it could. I'm sure there are people that have taken a lifetime to understand that. So it's just a really interesting world, and it's something that you can really come to appreciate. I really love it.
It's interesting because even from the same mezcalero family or manufacturer, producer, one batch could be different from the next.
Right.
There might be consistency because of the methods that they use, or the way I learned it from you is even the clay or the different processes that they use to distill will give flavor to that particular mezcal. The freshness, the type of the plant. There are many factors, and even the same mezcalero will not produce exactly the same mezcal again and again.
Well, yes. So there's so many factors or variables, and each variable introduces a huge variety. So there's thousands, if not millions, of possibilities, right? They would open up. So each mezcalero has got their technique. There's secret little techniques that's passed down, whether that's how many days they, roast it, how many days they ferment it, what they ferment it in, what they, all those things. So then you've got, even if they do it the same way every single time, the soil that they harvested that from, the source of water they got that from, those are imparting different properties as well. So yeah, no two batches are ever the same. And so there's a uniqueness to it. There's a preciousness to it that, if you really appreciate something, and most mezcal aficionados are really big on sustainability and understanding that, this is something that, will never be mass produced. It'll never be mainstream. It's respected, and it's not abused. It's something that is really something to be appreciated and treasured.
And that's why I'm learning that mezcal is the ultimate drink for filmmakers.
How is it?
Because every sip transports you to a different scene in your life. Or,
there you go. Yeah.
It's very interesting.
That is really interesting. Yeah. You'll find that, or at least I have found that certain flavors I'll get that I've not experienced since maybe I was a kid. And you know how smell and flavor can unlock memories in your mind, right? We know this. So if you get a taste or a smell of something that reminds you of running in a field when you were a kid, you could be transported back to that memory just for that moment, right? And then that's special. That's pretty valuable,
That's awesome. Well, thank you, Josh. Just like the goal of these conversations is to really learn beyond the skill, beyond what we do in the industry. And every time we talk about so many things, I always learn, and I'm always amazed that our relationship can be nurtured by this type of conversations. It's great to know that traveling and experiencing the uniqueness of life and valuing those things that cannot be mass reproduced is something that will make us better people even in the future. And if that's one of the takeaways that I can have from our conversations, I'm really happy that we have this time to share. If people want to connect with you, they want to know about your work as a cinematographer and the things that you're doing, are you more active on social media or your website or Instagram?
Everything, I'm really easy to find. You can look up my name or joshausley.com. You can find me on Instagram. Those are probably the best ways. LinkedIn. Those are great.
Now, my final question is, where is the Ausley Mezcal brand coming out?
I have no idea, but that's a good idea. Something I'm looking into. So
it's like the Coppola wine, the Ausley Mezcal.
Right? Yeah, right.
Well, thank you everybody for participating in these discussions online with your comments and subscribing and liking. Thank you for the people that are sharing these conversations. And I will see you the next time beyond the scenes.
Thank you very much.